I found him in the west corridor, away from the crowd. The music from the ballroom was muffled here, reduced to a distant pulse that matched the hammering of my heart. Baby A, my son, our son, was a warm weight against my chest, wrapped in the softest cashmere blanket money could buy. Jiwoo had spared no expense on things. Just on presents. Jiwoo. He turned, and for a split second, something flickered across his face. Annoyance, maybe. Or just the inconvenience of being interrupted. He'd loosened his tie, and I could smell the other Omega's scent still clinging to his collar. Jasmine and something sweet that made my stomach turn. Minsuk. My name sounded like a curse in his mouth. What are you doing out here? I told you to stay in the East Wing. I needed to see you. My voice came out smaller than I'd intended, and I hated myself for it. 3 years, and I still couldn't figure out how to speak to him without my throat closing up. I needed to talk to you about. Not here. His eyes darted back toward the ballroom, toward the laughter and clinking glasses and the Omega who'd just had his hands all over my alpha. You know better than this. The baby stirred against my chest, a tiny fist emerging from the blanket. I adjusted my hold, protective, and Jiwoo's gaze finally, dropped to the bundle in my arms. For a moment I thought I saw something soften in his expression. Hope flared hot and desperate in my chest. He missed you, I said quietly. They both did. I thought maybe you could come see them tonight. After the gala. Just for a few minutes. They're getting bigger, Anne. Minsuk. He said my name like a warning. Like I was a child reaching for something I had no right to touch. We've talked about this. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers, and comment where you're watching from. You won't believe what happens. Talked about what? About you pretending they don't exist. The words came out sharper than I'd planned, and I saw his jaw tighten. Jiwoo, they're 3 weeks old. You haven't held them once. You haven't even looked at them properly. You wouldn't even let me name them because you said. Because they complicate things. His voice was ice. Precise and cutting and so cold. I was very clear about what this arrangement was from the beginning. You agreed to it. I agreed to give you heirs. I agreed to be discreet. I didn't agree to raise your sons alone like there's some dirty secret you're ashamed of. His eyes flashed, and he stepped closer. Not close enough to touch, never that, but close enough that I could see the muscle jumping in his jaw. Close enough that I could smell the expensive cologne that used to make me feel safe, and now just made me feel sick. You knew what this was, he said, each word deliberate. Don't make demands like you're my equal. The slap of those words hit harder than his hand ever could. I'd known, of course. Known that I was the hidden Omega, the secret kept in gilded rooms. Known that his world would never accept someone like me. Soft where they were sharp, quiet where they were loud. But I'd thought the babies would change things. I'd thought that giving him sons, blood heirs, would finally make me matter. I'm not trying to be your equal, I whispered, and hated how my voice broke. I'm just trying to be acknowledged. They deserve a father who. They deserve. He laughed, and it was the ugliest sound I'd ever heard. Minsuk, listen to yourself. You're getting emotional over something that doesn't require emotion. This is business. This has always been business. The baby started to fuss, picking up on my distress the way infants do. His tiny face scrunched up, a warning that he was about to cry. I rocked him automatically, the motion so ingrained after 3 weeks of solo parenting that I didn't even think about it. Business, I repeated numbly. Our children are business. They're complications. His eyes went dead when he said it, flat and empty like I was looking at a stranger. Complications that I didn't ask for, that I told you to prevent, and that you assured me you had handled. The world tilted. I'd been on suppressants, had done everything right, but Omegaverse biology didn't care about pills and precautions when an alpha's rut synced with an Omega's heat. He knew that. He'd known that. You said you wanted heirs, I managed. You said. I said a lot of things. He straightened his cuffs, dismissive, already turning away. I say what I need to say to keep things running smoothly. Surely you understand that by now. The baby was crying now, real tears, and my hands shook as I tried to soothe him. Jiwoo glanced at us, at his son, his flesh and blood, and I saw nothing in his expression. No recognition. No regret. Nothing. Those are complications, Minsuk. Not commitments. There's a difference. They're your sons. My voice cracked completely. They're ours. How can you just go back to the nursery where you belong? He said it so casually, like he was dismissing a servant. Like we were nothing. Like we'd never been anything at all. And next time, don't embarrass yourself by leaving the wing. I have important guests tonight. He walked away. Just like that. Walked back toward the ballroom, toward the music and the laughter and the Omega who got to exist in his world while I rotted in the shadows. The baby screamed against my chest, and I stood there in the empty corridor, surrounded by marble and gold and the shattered pieces of every stupid hope I'd ever held on to. I'd given him everything. My body. My autonomy. My sons. And he'd given me nothing but a nursery to hide in and the cold certainty that I'd never mattered at all. The nursery was supposed to be my sanctuary. Soft cream walls, imported mobiles that played lullabies in 3 languages, blackout curtains that kept the world at bay. When I pushed open the door, still shaking from the corridor, still trying to quiet my son's tears, I expected the familiar smell of baby powder and the gentle hum of the white noise machine. Instead, I found my father sitting in the rocking chair. I froze. He never came here, never acknowledged this part of the estate, never spoke about his Omega son or the bastard grandchildren I'd produced. Seeing him here, in this space I'd carefully built to feel safe, felt like a violation. Father. I adjusted my hold on the baby, instinctively protective. What are you doing here? He didn't stand. Didn't even look at me directly, just stared at the empty crib where Baby B was still sleeping, oblivious to the fact that our entire world was about to shatter. Again. Sit down, Minsuk. I need to feed him first. He's been crying, Anne. The wet nurse can handle it. He gestured, and a woman I'd never seen before materialized from the shadows. She reached for my son with practiced efficiency, and every instinct I had screamed to refuse, to run, to protect. But you didn't refuse the head of the South Syndicate. Not even when he was your father. I handed over my baby and watched her disappear into the adjoining room. The door clicked shut. The absence of his weight against my chest felt like drowning. Sit. I sat. The door opened again, and they filed in one by one. Elder Choi with his liver-spotted hands and cruel mouth. Elder Park, who'd called me a disappointing waste of good genetics when I presented as Omega at 15. 3 more whose names I'd never bothered to learn because they'd never bothered to see me as anything more than a political inconvenience. The South Syndicate's inner circle, gathered in my nursery like vultures around carrion. There's been a development, my father said, and his voice had that flat quality that meant the decision was already made. That whatever came next, I was simply being informed, not consulted. The territorial dispute with the North has reached a critical point. We've lost the Harbor District, 2 major supply routes, and 6 men in the last month alone. I said nothing. What could I say? I knew nothing about syndicate politics. I'd been deliberately kept ignorant, raised to be decorative and fertile and silent. We've negotiated a treaty. Elder Choi leaned forward, his eyes glittering with something that made my skin crawl. A peace agreement that will end the bloodshed and restore our operational capacity. Peace. In our world, peace always had a price. What does this have to do with me? But I already knew. God help me, I already knew. You and the children will be transferred to the North Syndicate. My father said it like he was discussing a shipment of weapons. You'll be married to their boss, Min Jun. The ceremony will take place within the week. The room spun. I gripped the arms of the chair, trying to anchor myself to something solid while the floor fell away beneath me. Married. The word tasted like ash. You're giving me away. Like you're a valuable asset that can secure our survival, Elder Park interrupted. Which for once in your useless life, you actually are. The twins, Elder Choi added, and there was something hungry in his expression. Blood heirs of the South Syndicate, raised in North Territory. It's brilliant, really. Living insurance that neither side will betray the treaty. If Min Jun moves against us, he kills his own stepchildren, heirs that carry our bloodline. If we move against him, we murder our own grandchildren. Stepchildren. They were talking about my babies like they were bargaining chips. Like they were things instead of people, tools instead of tiny humans who needed their mother. No. I stood, the chair scraping against hardwood. Absolutely not. You can't just... I won't let you use my children as... You have no say in this matter. My father's voice cut through my protest like a blade. You lost the right to make decisions when you spread your legs for an alpha who was never going to claim you. The cruelty of it stole my breath. My own father. Looking at me with such complete disdain that I felt it like a physical weight. Ji-woo. I started desperate, grasping at anything. Doesn't want you. Elder Choi smiled, showing too many teeth. We already asked. He was quite clear that you and your complications are disposable. In fact, he seemed relieved we were handling the problem for him. Something inside me cracked. Splintered. Bled. The North boss agreed to the terms. My father continued, relentless. He'll provide protection, legitimacy, and a household befitting your new status. In exchange, you'll give him what all alphas want from omegas: compliance, heirs if he desires them, and a pretty face for public events. I already have children. My voice sounded strange, distant. I'm not some broodmare you can just. You're exactly that. Elder Park stood, straightening his suit. You're a womb with legs, boy. At least this way you'll be useful. The wet nurse returned with both babies, now quiet and swaddled. She placed them in their shared bassinet without looking at me, without acknowledging that she'd just witnessed my entire life being dismantled. You have 48 hours to pack, my father said, already moving toward the door. The other elders followed like a funeral procession. Take only what you need. The North will provide everything else. Someone will collect you on Tuesday morning. What if I refuse? I whispered. What if I just leave? Take them and disappear. My father paused in the doorway. For a moment, just a moment, something almost like pity crossed his face. Then Jiwoo's people will hunt you down and take the children anyway. And you'll die knowing your sons are being raised by a man who sees them as mistakes. He adjusted his cufflinks. At least with the North, you'll be there to protect them. Isn't that what mothers are supposed to do? The door closed. The lock clicked. I stood in the silence, staring at my sleeping sons, and understood with perfect, devastating clarity. I'd never been free. Not really. I'd just been traded from one cage to another. The only question was whether this new cage would have a monster who'd bother to learn my name. The North Syndicate compound rose from the hillside like a fortress. All sharp angles and tinted glass, modern where the South Estate had been classical, cold where I'd known suffocating opulence. The car stopped at gates that looked like they could withstand a military assault, and I clutched both twins closer, feeling their warmth against my chest like the only real things in a world that had gone abstract and terrifying. 48 hours. I'd had 48 hours to pack 3 years of my life into suitcases, to memorize the nursery I'd built with such desperate hope, to say goodbye to the illusion that I'd ever mattered to the father of my children. I hadn't slept. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jiwoo's dead expression when he'd called our sons complications. Heard my father's voice reducing me to a womb with legs. Felt the weight of knowing I was about to be handed to a man whose reputation made Jiwoo look like a saint. Minjun, the silent wolf of the North. I'd heard the stories, everyone had. How he'd taken control of the North Syndicate at 23 by systematically eliminating every elder who'd questioned his authority. How he never raised his voice because he never needed to. How people who crossed him simply disappeared. Cleanly. Efficiently. Without the theatrical violence that Jiwoo favored. The gates opened. We drove through. I was going to be claimed by a man who killed people the way other men filed paperwork, and I had 2 helpless infants who depended on me to somehow survive this. My hands shook as I adjusted baby B's blanket, trying to stop the trembling before anyone noticed weakness. The car stopped. The door opened. I expected guards. Expected to be hauled out and presented like livestock at auction. Expected hands on me, rough and entitled. Expected to be dragged to some alpha's bedroom before I'd even seen where my children would sleep. Instead, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor offered her hand. Mrs. Shin, she introduced herself. Head of household staff. Let me help you with the children. I stared at her offered hand like it might be a trap. In my world, kindness was always a prelude to cruelty. I can manage, I said, too sharp, too defensive. She didn't push. Just stepped back and gestured toward the entrance. Of course. Please follow me. The boss is waiting. The boss. My new husband. The man who now owned me and my sons as surely as if we'd been purchased. I followed her through corridors that smelled like pine and something clean I couldn't identify. Not the heavy cologne and cigar smoke of the South Estate. Not the cloying sweetness of the flowers Jiwoo sent instead of showing up. Just clean. She led me to a study. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and the late afternoon sun painted everything in shades of amber and gold. A man stood with his back to us, hands clasped behind him, looking out at the view. Minjun. Even from behind, he radiated a kind of contained power that made my breathing shallow. Tall, broader through the shoulders than Jiwoo, wearing a simple black shirt and slacks that probably cost more than the entire nursery I was leaving behind. His dark hair was slightly too long, touching his collar. Sir, Mrs. Shin said softly. They've arrived. He turned, and I got my first real look at the man who now controlled my fate. Handsome didn't cover it. Sharp features that looked carved rather than born, dark eyes that tracked over me, and the twins with an intensity that made me want to hide. But there was something different in his gaze. Something that wasn't the hungry possessiveness I'd learned to recognize in alphas. He looked at me the way you'd look at something breakable that someone had handed you without warning. The silence stretched. Baby A started to fuss, picking up on my anxiety. I rocked him automatically, waiting for the order to put them down, to present myself, to submit the way Omegas were expected to submit. Where do you want the nursery? I blinked. What? The nursery. His voice was lower than I'd expected, calmer. He gestured toward Mrs. Shin without taking his eyes off me. East wing gets morning light. West wing is quieter. Your choice. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers and comment where you're watching from. You won't believe what happens. My choice. Like I was a person who got to make choices about where my children slept. Like this was a conversation instead of an order. I don't. I couldn't form words. Couldn't understand what was happening. He moved closer, and I instinctively stepped back. Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. He stopped immediately, maintaining distance. You don't need to be afraid, he said, and it wasn't a command. It was information. Like he was explaining something I might not know. I'm not going to hurt you. You don't have to lie. The words came out before I could stop them, bitter and exhausted. I know what I am. I know why I'm here. You don't have to pretend this is anything other than what it is. His eyes narrowed slightly. Not in anger, in assessment. What do you think this is? A transaction. I lifted my chin, trying for dignity even though my arms were full of babies, and I probably looked like exactly what I was, a used Omega being passed between alphas like property. I'm collateral. They're insurance. You own us now. I understand how this works. I see. He was quiet for a moment, studying me. Then he did something that made my entire understanding of the world tilt. He pulled out a chair from the desk and gestured to it. Sit. You look exhausted. It had to be a test. Some kind of trap where if I sat without permission, I'd be punished for presumption. I'm fine standing. Minsuk. The way he said my name, my actual name, not Omega or boy or any of the other dismissive things I'd been called, made something in my chest constrict. You've been traveling with 2 infants. You're tired. Sit. Please. Please. An alpha was saying please to me. I sat, mostly because my legs were shaking. He moved to the window, giving me space, giving me air to breathe. When he spoke again, his voice had that same calm certainty that I was starting to realize was just how he sounded. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just sure. The twins are 3 weeks old, he said. They'll need frequent feeding, temperature regulation, and a secure space. That's the priority. Everything else can wait. Everything else, I repeated numbly. He turned to look at me, and there was something in his expression I couldn't read. You expected me to claim you immediately, to assert ownership, to treat you the way you've been treated. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. I'm not him, Minjun said quietly. Whoever taught you that you don't deserve basic respect, that you have to earn the right to be treated like a person, I'm not him. Baby B started crying, the real crying that meant he needed to be fed soon. I fumbled with the diaper bag, trying to find a bottle with one hand while holding both of them. Let me. Before I could protest, Minjun had crossed the room and taken the diaper bag. Not the babies, the bag. He found the bottle, checked the temperature the way someone who actually knew about infants would, and handed it to me. Our fingers brushed. I flinched. He stepped back immediately. Mrs. Shin will show you to your rooms, he said. The nursery can be set up wherever you're most comfortable. If you need anything at all, she has full authority to provide it. He moved toward the door, then paused. We'll talk more tomorrow, when you've rested. Wait, I didn't know why I stopped him. Didn't know what I wanted to ask. He looked back. Why? The word came out broken. Why are you being? Why aren't you? Because they're children, he said simply. Not bargaining chips. Not insurance policies. Children. His eyes met mine. And you're their parent. Not property. That matters. He left before I could respond. Before I could process what it meant that a man like him, a killer, a syndicate boss, someone who controlled an empire built on blood, thought I mattered. Mrs. Shin touched my shoulder gently. Come, let's get you and the little ones settled. East Wing really does have the most beautiful light. I followed her, babies in my arms, into territory I didn't understand. Where monsters asked where you wanted the nursery. Where alphas said please. Where maybe possibly I might be allowed to breathe. The nursery Mrs. Shin had prepared in the east wing was twice the size of the one I'd left behind. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a private garden where cherry trees swayed in the evening breeze. The cribs were handcrafted wood, not the sterile white plastic Jiwoo's decorator had chosen. There was a rocking chair positioned to catch the morning light, blackout curtains for when the babies needed darkness, and a changing table stocked with supplies I recognized as the premium brands I'd requested but never received at the South Estate. Someone had been paying attention to details I didn't think anyone cared about. I'd just finished feeding baby A when Minjun knocked. Actually knocked, on the doorframe of a room in his own house, waiting for permission to enter a space he owned. "Come in," I said, too surprised to remember I should probably be more deferential. He entered slowly, telegraphing his movements like he was approaching something skittish. Maybe he was. I certainly felt like a cornered animal, waiting for the trap to spring. "I wanted to establish some ground rules," he said, staying near the door. "So we're both clear on expectations. Here it comes," I thought. The list of demands. When I was available for his use. What positions he preferred. Whether I was allowed to speak during or if silence was expected. All the rules Jiwoo had established and then broken whenever his mood shifted. I positioned myself between Minjun and the cribs without thinking about it. Protective. Pointless, probably, but instinct didn't care about logic. "First," Minjun said, and his voice had that same steady quality that I was learning meant he'd already thought through every word. "I won't touch you unless you ask. Not for bonding, not for claiming, not for anything. Your body is yours. What happened before, whatever you experienced before you came here, that's not how this works." I stared at him, waiting for the caveat. The "unless I decide otherwise" or "until I get tired of waiting," that men like him always added. It didn't come. "Second," he continued, "the twins are under my protection, but you're their parent. I won't override your decisions about their care. You know what they need better than I do. I'm here to support, not control." "Why?" The word escaped before I could cage it. "Why would you agree to this arrangement if you didn't want to, if you're not going to?" "Use you." He said it plainly, without judgment. "Because the treaty needed to happen. Because your father and the elders made it clear that you and the children came as a package. Because refusing would have meant more bloodshed." He moved slightly, just enough to lean against the doorframe, making himself smaller. "Less threatening. But none of that means I have to treat you the way they did. They told you." My voice came out flat. "About Jiwoo. About what I was to him. They told me you were a hidden omega with twin infants. That you'd been unacknowledged." His jaw tightened. "They didn't need to tell me more than that. I could see it in your eyes when you arrived. The way you flinched. The way you positioned yourself between me and the babies like I might take them." Heat crept up my neck. "I didn't. You did. You still are." He nodded toward how I was standing, body angled to shield the cribs. "And that's fine. That's smart, actually. You don't know me. You don't know if I'm safe. Trust has to be earned. I didn't know what to do with this. With an alpha who acknowledged that trust was something earned rather than demanded. "Third rule," he said. "This is your home, not your cage. You can go anywhere in the compound. The library, the gardens, the kitchen at 3 a.m. if that's what you need. You're not confined to this wing. You're not hiding. People will see me." It came out small. Fearful. Yes. Something fierce crossed his expression. "They'll see my family, and they'll treat you with the respect that demands, or they'll answer to me." Family. He said it like he meant it. Like 2 babies he'd known for 6 hours and an omega he'd met this afternoon counted as something worth claiming publicly. "I don't understand you," I whispered. "You don't have to." He straightened. "You just have to know the rules. Everything else can develop however it develops. Or not. There's no timeline here, Minsuk. No expectations beyond basic respect." He left before I could respond, closing the door quietly behind him. I stood in the beautiful nursery with my sleeping sons and tried to figure out what kind of trap this was. Because it had to be a trap. Men like Minjun didn't just give without taking. There had to be a price. There was always a price. I was still trying to figure it out at 2 a.m. when Baby B woke up screaming. His brother joined in immediately, their cries echoing off the high ceilings in stereo. I stumbled out of bed, still half asleep, trying to remember which one had eaten last, and whether I'd sterilized enough bottles, and why everything felt so impossibly hard. I was in the middle of trying to warm a bottle one-handed, while holding a shrieking infant, when the door opened. Minjun stood there in sleep pants and a t-shirt, hair mussed, looking completely unbothered by the fact that it was 2 in the morning and my children were screaming loud enough to wake the entire compound. "I heard," he said simply. "Can I help?" "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." He was already moving into the room, already reaching for baby A with hands that looked too large to hold something so small, but somehow knew exactly how to support a newborn's head. "I want to." I watched stunned as this man, this killer, this syndicate boss, this alpha who could have anyone and anything he wanted, walked my son around the nursery with the kind of gentle competence that spoke of actual experience. He murmured something too quiet for me to hear, something that sounded almost like a lullaby, and baby A's cries quieted to fussy whimpers. "You've done this before," I said. "I have younger cousins." He adjusted his hold, rocking slightly. "Spent a lot of time with them when they were small. Before I took over the syndicate." A pause. Before things got complicated. The bottle finished warming. I tested it on my wrist, perfect temperature, and settled into the rocking chair with baby B. Minjun stayed standing, swaying gently, his large hand supporting my son's tiny head with a tenderness that made my throat tight. We didn't speak, just existed in the quiet intimacy of a 2 a.m. feeding. Two people taking care of helpless things that depended on them. It shouldn't have felt significant. It was just logistics, just basic childcare. But Jiwoo had never even asked if I needed help. And Minjun was here, at 2 in the morning, holding a child that wasn't his, asking for nothing in return. "Why are you being kind to me?" I asked into the darkness. He looked at me over baby A's downy head, and his expression was unreadable. "Because you deserve kindness," he said, like it was obvious. Like it was the simplest thing in the world. "Because they deserve a parent who isn't constantly afraid. Because this is what family means, Minsuk. We show up." Baby B finished his bottle. I burped him, changed him, settled him back in his crib. Minjun did the same with baby A, his movements careful and practiced. Then he headed for the door. "Minjun." He paused. "Thank you." He didn't smile exactly, but something softened in his expression. "Get some sleep. I'll listen for them if they wake again." "You don't." "I know. But I will anyway." He closed the door, and I sat in the darkness of my beautiful new nursery, trying to reconcile everything I knew about men like him with the reality of what I'd just witnessed. Maybe the trap wasn't coming. Maybe this was just what he'd said it was: boundaries, respect, showing up. Maybe, possibly, I'd just met the first alpha who understood that protection wasn't about cages. It was about giving someone room to breathe. The first message came 3 days after I arrived at the North Compound. I was in the garden, babies asleep in their twin stroller, watching cherry blossoms drift across the stone path like snow. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out without thinking, without remembering that some ghosts don't stay buried just because you've moved to a different house. "Jiwoo, you really thought you could just leave?" My hands went cold. The phone felt like a live grenade, and I should have turned it off, should have blocked him immediately, but I was frozen. 3 days of peace, of gentle mornings and Minjun's quiet presence. And now Jiwoo's name on my screen brought everything crashing back. "Jiwoo, answer me. I know you're reading this." I turned the phone off, slipped it back in my pocket, tried to enjoy the garden, the sunshine, the fact that my sons were sleeping peacefully in a place where they were seen as children instead of complications. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The messages kept coming. I'd turn the phone on to check the time or to photograph the twins, and there would be more. Always more. "Jiwoo, the elders had no right to trade you away. You belong to me. Jiwoo, those are my sons. My blood. You can't just take them and play house with that North bastard. Jiwoo, you think he actually wants you? You're used goods, Minsuk. A whore who spread his legs for me, and now you're spreading them for him. Is that it? You just need an alpha, any alpha, to tell you what to do?" I read them in the bathroom at 3 a.m. while feeding baby A. Read them in the nursery when I should have been napping. Read them until the words blurred together into one long accusation that I was worthless, that I was nothing, that I'd always been nothing. The worst part was how familiar they felt. How easily I slipped back into the belief that Jiwoo was right. That Minjun's kindness was temporary, conditional, something that would evaporate the moment he realized what I really was. Jiwoo. He's going to get bored of playing daddy to another man's bastards. Then what? You think the North will keep protecting you when you're not useful anymore? Jiwoo, I could have given you everything. I could have made you somebody. But you were too needy, too demanding, always wanting more than you deserved. Jiwoo, come back. We can fix this. I'll acknowledge them if that's what you need. I'll claim you publicly. Just stop this insanity and come home. That one made me laugh. A bitter, broken sound that woke baby B and made him cry. Come home. As if the South Estate had ever been home. As if his acknowledgement wasn't just another way to control me. I picked up my son and rocked him, reading the messages over his downy head. Jiwoo, you're mine. Do you understand that? Mine. Not his. Those children are mine. Everything you are is because I allowed it. Jiwoo, answer me. Jiwoo, answer me. My phone became a source of constant dread. I kept it on silent, kept it face down, but I could feel it there. Feel the weight of Jiwoo's words accumulating like poison. I stopped sleeping. Started flinching at every notification sound, every buzz, every reminder that he was still there, still reaching for me across the distance. I thought I was hiding it well. I smiled at Mrs. Shin, thanked her for the meals she brought when I forgot to eat. I took care of the twins with the same focused attention I always had. I pretended everything was fine. But Minjun noticed. Of course he did. I was in the nursery, phone in hand, reading the latest message. You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back, and I won't be there to catch you. When he knocked. Come in, I said automatically, shoving the phone under a burp cloth. He entered, carrying 2 cups of tea. Set one on the table beside the rocking chair where I sat, kept the other for himself. Didn't mention the phone I'd so obviously tried to hide. You've been distracted, he said. Not an accusation. Just an observation. I'm fine. Minsuk. He settled into the chair across from me, long legs stretched out, completely at ease in a way I envied. You don't eat unless Mrs. Shin brings food to you. You're not sleeping. I can hear you pacing at night. And you jump every time your phone makes a sound. A pause. He's contacting you. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers and comment where you're watching from. You won't believe what happens. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. There was no point in lying. What's he saying? It doesn't matter. It matters if it's affecting you like this. Minjun's voice stayed level calm, but there was something underneath it. Something protective. Show me. No. Minsuk. You'll go to war over it. I met his eyes. You'll take it as a violation of the treaty or a threat or something that requires a response. And then the twins will grow up in the middle of a syndicate war because their biological father can't let go. Minjun was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and looked at me with an intensity that should have been frightening but somehow wasn't. You're protecting him, he said softly. Even now. Even after everything he's done to you. You're trying to protect him from consequences. I'm protecting them. I glanced at the cribs where both babies slept. If you go after Jiwoo, the South will retaliate. The peace will shatter. And my sons will grow up knowing they're the reason people died. They won't be the reason. He will be. Minjun straightened. But you're right that it's your decision. Your phone. Your boundary to set. He picked up his tea, took a sip. Block him. Or don't. But know that nothing he says changes what's real. You're safe here. He says I'm not. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. He says you're going to get bored. That you'll realize I'm used goods and another man's bastards aren't worth the trouble. That I'm nothing without him. And you believe him. I don't know what to believe. My voice cracked. 3 weeks ago I thought he loved me. I thought bearing his children meant something. I was wrong about all of it. How do I know I'm not wrong about this too? Minjun set down his tea. Rose. Crossed the space between us in 3 strides and knelt. Actually knelt. In front of my chair so we were eye level. Look at me, he said. I did. Couldn't not with him this close. I'm not him, Minjun said, each word deliberate. I don't say things I don't mean. I don't make promises I won't keep. And I don't need you to earn basic human decency by being perfect or useful or whatever impossible standard he set. His eyes held mine. You're safe here. The twins are safe here. That's not conditional. That's not temporary. That's real. How can you promise that? Because I choose to. Simple. Absolute. Every day I choose to. And I'll keep choosing to until you believe it. My phone buzzed under the burp cloth. We both heard it. Jiwoo, probably with another desperate message about ownership and blood, and all the things that had never actually meant anything to him. Block him if you want to, Minjun said, standing. Or keep reading them if you need to see who he really is. But stop letting his words live in your head rent-free. He doesn't get that space anymore. He doesn't get any part of you unless you give it to him. He left, taking his tea with him, leaving mine cooling on the table. I pulled out my phone. Read the new message. I made you. Without me, you're nothing. And for the first time, I saw it for what it was. Not truth. Just the desperate gasping of a man who'd lost something he'd never valued until it was gone. I didn't block him. Not yet. But I turned off notifications, silenced his number, and I drank my tea in the quiet nursery, watching my son sleep, letting Minjun's words settle into the spaces where Jiwoo's poison had lived for too long. You're safe here. Maybe it was time to start believing it. It happened at midnight on the 10th day. I'd been doing so well, settling into routines, learning the rhythms of the North compound, even sleeping for more than 2 hours at a stretch. The twins were thriving. Baby A had smiled for the first time that morning, and I'd actually felt something like hope unfurling in my chest. Then I'd made the mistake of checking my blocked messages folder. 43 messages from Jiwoo. 43 variations of the same theme. I was his, the twins were his. Minjun would eventually tire of playing house with damaged goods. The most recent one had a photo attached, the South Estate nursery, now converted back into a guest room. Like we'd never existed at all. Like those 3 years had been erased as easily as removing a crib and repainting walls. I'd held it together through dinner, through bath time, through the evening feeding and the careful routine of putting 2 tiny humans to sleep. But when Baby B woke at midnight screaming, something inside me just broke. I tried. I picked him up, walked him around the nursery, made all the soothing sounds that usually worked. But I was crying too, silent tears streaming down my face while my son wailed in my arms, and I couldn't stop thinking about Jiwoo's messages. About how easily I'd been erased. About how Minjun would eventually do the same because that's what powerful men did. They used you up and moved on. The door opened. Minjun, of course, because he always seemed to know when I needed help even when I couldn't admit it. Give him to me, he said quietly. I should have protested. Should have said I could handle it. Instead, I just handed over my screaming son and collapsed into the rocking chair like a puppet with cut strings. Minjun walked the perimeter of the nursery, Baby B against his shoulder, his large hand supporting the tiny head with practiced ease. He didn't ask why I was crying, didn't demand explanations, just took care of my son while I fell apart in the corner. I don't understand why you're doing this, I said into the darkness. My voice sounded wrecked. I don't understand what you get out of it. Out of what? This. All of this. I gestured vaguely at the nursery, at him, at the life he'd given us. You could have anyone. You could have an Omega who wasn't broken, who didn't come with another man's children, who could actually be a proper partner instead of just this. Baby B's cries were quieting. Minjun swayed gently, his movements hypnotic in the dim glow of the nightlight. You think you're broken, he said. Not a question. I know I am. The words tasted like ash. 3 years, Minjun. I stayed for 3 years with a man who treated me like a secret he was ashamed of. I let him touch me, use me, get me pregnant twice, and I never once demanded he treat me with basic respect. What kind of person does that? Someone who was trying to survive. No. I shook my head violently. Someone who was pathetic. Someone who was so desperate to belong to someone powerful that I convinced myself being owned was the same as being safe. The admission hung in the air between us. I'd never said it out loud before. Never let myself acknowledge that I'd traded my autonomy for the illusion of protection. That I'd stayed not because I loved Jiwoo, but because I was terrified of being unprotected in a world that devoured weak Omegas. Minjun settled into the chair across from mine, Baby B now calm against his chest. The baby's tiny fist had curled around Minjun's finger, holding on like an anchor. You stayed because you believed that belonging to someone powerful meant you were protected, Minjun said slowly, like he was working through a complicated equation. That's what you're saying. At least when you belong to someone in the syndicate, other monsters can't touch you. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. At least you have a shield, even if the person holding it doesn't care about you. It's better than being alone. Better than being prey for everyone. Minsuk. His voice was so gentle it hurt. You weren't protected. You were isolated. It's the same thing. It's not. He adjusted his hold on Baby B, supporting the drowsy infant with a tenderness that made my throat tight. Protection means someone stands between you and harm. Isolation means someone cuts you off from everyone else, so you have no choice but to depend on them. There's a difference between a guard and a prison. I opened my mouth to argue. Closed it. Opened it again. Jiwoo didn't protect you, Minjun continued, his eyes on the baby in his arms. He made sure you had nowhere else to go. He kept you hidden so you'd believe he was the only option. He made you think that his scraps of attention were more than you deserved. That's not protection. That's control. But I was safe. Were you? He looked up then, and the intensity in his gaze pinned me in place. Were you safe when you gave birth alone because he couldn't be bothered to show up? Were you safe when he called your children complications? Were you safe when he traded you away like livestock and didn't even have the decency to say goodbye? Each question landed like a physical blow. You were surviving, Minjun said softly. That's not the same as being safe. And it's sure as hell not the same as being protected. Baby B had fallen asleep, his tiny face peaceful against Minjun's chest. The alpha stood, moved to the crib, and laid him down with the kind of care that spoke of practice. Of actually giving a damn. You think I'm going to get tired of you, he said, not looking at me. You think I'll realize you're not worth the trouble and throw you out like he did. Won't you? No. Simple. Absolute. He turned to face me. Because I didn't take you in to use you. I took you in because the treaty required it, yes. But I'm keeping you, keeping all three of you, because you're people who deserve safety. Real safety. Not the conditional, isolating kind that evaporates the moment you stop being convenient. I don't know how to believe that. I know. He moved to the door, paused with his hand on the frame. But you don't have to believe it right now. You just have to stay. Let me prove it. Let me show you the difference between a prison and a home. What if I can't? My voice broke. What if I'm too broken to ever trust anyone again? Then we'll figure it out together. He looked at me over his shoulder. That's what family does, Minsuk. We show up. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. He left me there in the darkness, surrounded by sleeping babies and the revolutionary idea that maybe, I deserved something more than survival. That maybe protection wasn't supposed to feel like drowning. That maybe the difference between a guard and a prison was whether you were allowed to breathe. I sat in the rocking chair until dawn, watching my sons sleep in their safe, beautiful cribs, and let myself consider the possibility that Minjun meant what he said. That this wasn't a cage with better furniture. That this might actually be home. I knew something was different when Minjun asked me to join him for breakfast in the formal dining room instead of the casual kitchen, where we usually ate. He was already dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than everything I owned, and there was something purposeful in the way he moved. There's a gathering tonight, he said, pouring tea with steady hands. Neutral ground. All the major syndicates. It's meant to reinforce the peace treaty. My stomach dropped. You want me to go? I want you to have the choice. He set the teapot down. But yes, I think it would be good for people to see that the treaty isn't just words on paper. That it's real. That you and the twins are under North protection. The twins. He wanted me to bring my 4-week-old sons to a room full of criminals and killers. They're so small, I said. What if something happens? What if someone? Nothing will happen. His voice had that absolute certainty I was learning to recognize. I'll have our best security there. Mrs. Shin will accompany us to help with the twins. And I will not leave your side. He paused. But if you're not ready, we don't go. Your comfort matters more than politics. I thought about Jiwoo. About how he'd kept me hidden for 3 years, how he'd been ashamed to be seen with me, how I'd existed in shadows while he played Prince in the light. About the messages still accumulating in my blocked folder, claiming ownership he'd never actually wanted. I'll go, I said. Something flickered in Minjun's expression. Pride, maybe. Or respect. Then we'll show them what family looks like. The venue was a renovated warehouse in neutral territory, exposed brick and industrial lighting, expensive enough to signal status, but sparse enough to avoid appearing soft. I stepped out of the car with baby A in my arms, Mrs. Shin behind me with baby B, and immediately felt 100 pairs of eyes lock onto us. Minjun was there instantly, his hand settling on my lower back. Steady. Grounding. A silent promise that I wasn't alone. Breathe, he murmured. You belong here. We walked in together, and I tried not to think about how different this was from every event I'd attended at Jiwoo's side. How I'd always entered through back entrances, waited in side rooms, existed in the periphery where no one would question my presence. How I'd been a secret to protect rather than a person to acknowledge. Minjun led us straight into the main hall. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to Starry-Eyed Lovers, and comment where you're watching from. You won't believe what happens. The room went quiet. Not completely. Conversations continued in pockets. Deals were still being made in corners. But there was a noticeable shift. People turning to look. Assessing. Calculating what it meant that the North boss had brought an Omega and 2 infants to a syndicate gathering. Elder Choi from the South was there, his expression unreadable. Elder Park. My father, who looked at me like I was a stranger. And in the back, leaning against a pillar with a glass of whiskey and eyes like knives. Jiwoo. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw everything I needed to see. The possessive rage. The disbelief that I was here, public and visible, holding our sons. the barely controlled fury of a man who'd thrown something away and couldn't understand why someone else had picked it up. Minjun felt me tense. His hand pressed more firmly against my back. "Stay with me," he said quietly. We moved through the room like we owned it. Because Minjun did, in a way. Own the space, own the attention, commanded respect without ever raising his voice. People parted for us. Nodded respectfully. Some even smiled at the twins, genuine smiles that suggested they saw babies instead of political pawns. We reached the center of the room, where the major syndicate heads had gathered. Minjun didn't hesitate. "I'd like to introduce my family," he said, his voice carrying without effort. Not loud, just absolute. Min Suk and our sons. Not the Omega from the south. Not the treaty arrangement. Not the mother of the bloodline insurance. Family. Our sons. Like they were his. Like he'd chosen them. Baby A chose that moment to make a soft cooing sound, his tiny fist waving in the air. Someone laughed, not mockingly but with genuine warmth. An older woman from the East Syndicate moved closer. "May I?" she asked, looking at me. Actually asking permission. I glanced at Minjun. He nodded slightly, leaving the choice to me. "Of course," I said. She peered at Baby A, her weathered face softening. "Beautiful. Both of them. You're very blessed. Blessed. Not lucky to be claimed. Not fortunate someone took you in. Blessed, like we were a real family worth celebrating." More people approached. Asked about the twins' names. We'd finally chosen them. Minho and Minjae. Asked how old they were. Treated them like children instead of treaty guarantees. And through it all, Minjun's hand stayed on my lower back, a constant reminder that I wasn't alone, wasn't hidden, wasn't something to be ashamed of. I caught Jiwoo watching from across the room. He'd downed his whiskey and gotten another. His knuckles were white around the glass, his jaw so tight I could see the muscle jumping even from this distance. He started walking toward us. Minjun noticed. Of course he did. His hand shifted slightly on my back, protective but not possessive. "Ready." Jiwoo stopped a few feet away, his eyes raking over me with an intensity that used to make me shiver. Now it just made me tired. "Min Suk," he said. My name sounded wrong in his mouth. "You look well." "Thank you." His gaze dropped to Baby A in my arms. Something complicated crossed his face. Longing, maybe, or regret, or just anger that someone else was getting credit for children he'd helped create but never wanted. "They've grown," he said. "Yes." "I never," he stopped. Started again. "I should have been there. When they were born. I should have." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." Minjun didn't move, didn't speak, but his presence beside me was a wall. A shield that didn't require isolation. A protection that didn't demand I make myself smaller. Jiwoo's eyes snapped to him. "You think you can just take what's mine?" "I didn't take anything." Minjun's voice was calm. Unbothered. "You threw it away. There's a difference. Those are my sons. Those are children under my protection," Minjun corrected. "Children who have a parent who shows up for them. Which, from what I understand, is more than you ever did." Jiwoo's hand twitched toward his jacket. Toward where I knew he kept a gun. Minjun didn't flinch, didn't react, just stood there with his hand on my back and waited. "This isn't over," Jiwoo said finally. "Yes," Minjun said quietly. "It is." Jiwoo left, shoving past a cluster of East Syndicate members hard enough to spill someone's drink. I watched him go and felt nothing. No longing. No regret. Just the distant recognition that I'd wasted 3 years on a man who'd never deserved them. "You all right?" Minjun asked softly. I looked down at Minho in my arms, at Minjae with Mrs. Shin, at the room full of people who'd just witnessed me being claimed as family instead of hidden as shame. "Yes," I said and meant it. "I'm all right." His hand stayed on my back for the rest of the night. Steady. Grounding. Protective. Exactly where it belonged. The message came through official channels this time. Not Jiwoo's personal number that I'd silenced, but a formal request delivered through South Syndicate intermediaries to North Syndicate representatives. He wanted a meeting. Neutral ground. Just to talk, the message said. To settle things civilly between adults. I should have said no immediately. Should have deleted the request and moved on with the life I was building. But some part of me, the part that had spent 3 years trying to make him love me, needed closure. Needed to look him in the eye one more time and understand that I'd made the right choice. "Absolutely not," Minjun said when I told him. We were in his study, the twins napping upstairs with Mrs. Shin nearby. Late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, painting everything gold. "I need to do this," I said. You need to stay away from a man who sent you 43 increasingly unhinged messages in 2 weeks. Minjun's voice was level, but there was steel underneath. He's not looking for closure, Minsuk. He's looking for control. Then come with me. The words came out before I'd fully thought them through. He asked for a private meeting, but the request didn't specify I had to come alone. You can be there. As my protection. Something shifted in Minjun's expression. Your protection? Yes. I met his eyes. I'm not going alone. But I am going. I need him to hear me say it. That I choose this. That I choose you and the boys and the life we're building. I need him to hear it from me. Minjun studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. The old warehouse district. Tomorrow at 8. I'll have our people secure the perimeter. The warehouse smelled like dust and old metal. Jiwoo was already there when we arrived, leaning against a support beam with studied casualness that didn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. He'd dressed for this expensive suit, hair styled perfectly, looking every inch the syndicate prince he'd been raised to be. His expression darkened when he saw Minjun beside me. I asked for a private meeting, Jiwoo said. And I agreed to a meeting, I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I didn't agree to private. So you need him to hold your hand now? Can't even face me without your new owner present. He's not my owner. The words came easier than I expected. That's the difference you never understood. Jiwoo pushed off the beam, taking a step closer. Minjun shifted almost imperceptibly, positioning himself slightly in front of me. Not blocking me, not taking over, just present. I want my sons back, Jiwoo said bluntly. This has gone on long enough. The treaty is signed, the territories are settled. There's no reason for them to stay in North custody. North custody, I repeated. Is that what you think this is? What else would it be? Jiwoo's laugh was bitter. You think he actually cares about you? About them? He's using you, Minsuk. Using you to secure the treaty, to make himself look magnanimous. The moment it's politically convenient, you'll be out. But I'm their father. I have rights. Rights. The word exploded out of me. You have rights? You didn't want them. You called them complications. You wouldn't even hold them. I made mistakes. For the first time, something that might have been genuine emotion crossed Jiwoo's face. I was scared, all right? I didn't know how to be a father. But I'm ready now. I can do better. We can try again. No. Minsuk. Their names are Minho and Minjae. My voice shook, but I kept going. Do you even know that? Do you know which one has the birthmark on his left ankle? Which one hates being swaddled? Which one cries when he's overtired versus when he's actually hungry? Jiwoo's jaw tightened. I haven't had the chance. You've had 6 weeks. 6 weeks to ask. To visit. To show even the smallest interest in who they are as people instead of what they represent as heirs. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You never wanted to be their father. You wanted ownership. You wanted to control something you could point to and say mine, without actually doing any of the work. And he's so much better? Jiwoo's mask was cracking, rage bleeding through. He's there for every sleepless night? Every fever? Playing daddy to another man's bastards? Yes. Minjun spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but absolute. I am. Jiwoo's eyes snapped to him. They're not yours. They are now. Minjun's hand found the small of my back. Family isn't just biology. It's showing up. It's 3 a.m. feedings and changing diapers and learning the difference between tired cries and hungry cries. It's being there, which you never were. You self-righteous, Jiwoo took a step forward. You stole them. You stole My Omega, my sons, my family. I was never yours. The words ripped out of me. I was your secret. Your shame. The thing you used when it was convenient and hid when it wasn't. You didn't lose me, Jiwoo. You threw me away. And now you're angry because someone else saw value in what you treated like trash. His hand moved. Fast. Reaching for me with that same possessive grip he'd always used, like if he could just get his hands on me, I'd remember my place. Remember that I belonged to him. Minjun moved faster. One moment Jiwoo was lunging forward. The next he was on the ground, Minjun's hand wrapped around his throat, the cold press of a gun barrel against Jiwoo's temple. No dramatic flourish. No raised voice. Just lethal efficiency that happened so quickly I barely registered the movement. Don't, Minjun said calmly. Don't touch him. Don't threaten him. Don't even look at him wrong. Are we clear? Jiwoo struggled. Minjun pressed harder, and Jiwoo went still. He's been there for every sleepless night, I said, my voice surprisingly steady as I looked down at the man who'd once made me feel so small. Every fever. Every cry. He knows their names. He knows which lullaby calms Min-jae and which bottle Minho prefers. He's been there. You never were. I could kill you right now, Min-jun said conversationally. It would be easy. Justified, even you attacked first. Self-defense. He released the pressure slightly. But you're not worth breaking the peace over. You're not worth the paperwork. You're not worth anything, really. Because you already lost everything that mattered. He stood, removed the gun, stepped back. Jiwoo coughed, rolled to his side, rage and humiliation warring in his expression. This isn't over, Jiwoo rasped. Yes, I said quietly. It is. Minjun's hand found mine. We walked out of that warehouse together, leaving Jiwoo on the concrete floor with nothing but his wounded pride and the growing realization that ownership without care was just another word for nothing. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I was already home. We didn't speak on the drive back to the compound. Minjun's hand stayed wrapped around mine, steady and warm, while I stared out the window at Seoul's lights blurring past. I kept replaying the warehouse, Jiwoo on the ground, the cold efficiency of Minjun's protection. The moment I'd finally said everything I'd needed to say for 3 years. I felt hollowed out. Empty in a way that wasn't painful, just clean. Like I'd finally set down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. When we got home, Mrs. Shin met us at the door with a knowing look. The boys are asleep, she said gently. I'll stay the night if you need me. Thank you, Minjun said. But we're fine. Get some rest. She left, and suddenly it was just us in the quiet entryway. Minjun released my hand, and I felt the absence like cold water. Garden, he asked. I nodded. The cherry trees were in full bloom now, petals drifting across the stone paths like snow. We sat on the bench where I'd received Jiwoo's first message, where I'd started this journey from one prison toward something I still didn't fully understand. You did well tonight, Minjun said. I told him the truth. Finally. That took courage. He was quiet for a moment, then turned to face me fully. I need to tell you something. Give you something, actually. My stomach tightened. Here it comes, I thought. The other shoe. The revelation that this had all been temporary, conditional, contingent on. You're free to go. The words didn't make sense at first. I stared at him, trying to parse them into something that fit the world I knew. What? You and the twins. His voice was steady, certain, like he'd thought through every word. The treaty is secure. Jiwoo won't challenge it, not after tonight. Your father and the South elders have what they wanted, which means the political necessity of this arrangement is resolved. He paused. You can leave. Take the boys. North Syndicate protection goes with you, wherever you choose to go. A house, security, financial support, all of it. No strings attached. You're sending me away? The words came out small, broken. No. He shifted closer, his eyes intense. I'm giving you a choice. Real choice, not the illusion of it. You can leave, build a life somewhere safe, raise your sons away from syndicate politics, be free. Or, he stopped. Start it again. Or you can stay. Not because you have to. Not because you're trapped or afraid or believe you have no other option. But because you want to. Because you choose to. I couldn't breathe. You're letting me choose. I'm giving you the freedom I should have given you from the start. His hand found mine again, gentle. You've spent your whole life being traded between powerful men who treated you like property. I won't be another link in that chain. If you stay, it's because you want this. Want us. Want to build something real together. Tears spilled over, hot and fast. What if I'm not ready? What if I don't know what I want yet? Then you figure it out here, with full support and no pressure. Or you figure it out somewhere else. Either way, his thumb brushed across my knuckles. Either way, you're free. That's what matters. Freedom. Real freedom. Not the conditional kind that evaporated when you stopped being useful. Not the isolating kind that required you to give up pieces of yourself. Just freedom. I choose to stay, I whispered. Min-suk. I choose this. Stronger now. I choose you, and the life we're building, and the fact that you're asking instead of taking. I choose mornings in the garden and 2 a.m. feedings, and the way you learned their names before they were a week old. I choose. My voice broke. I choose peace. Finally. Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe. Or joy so quiet it almost looked like pain. Then let's make it official, he said. Not a treaty arrangement. Not political theater. Just us. Real. We bonded 3 days later in the nursery at dawn. No guests. No ceremony planned by syndicate elders. No photographers or politicians or anyone who would turn our lives into performance. Just Minjun and me, Mrs. Shin as witness, and the twins sleeping peacefully in their cribs while soft light spilled through the windows. Minjun had found a traditional bonding ritual, the kind omegas and alphas used before syndicates and politics turned everything transactional. Simple vows. Simple promises. I vow to protect you, he said, his voice low and certain. Not by isolating you, but by standing beside you. I vow to protect them, he glanced at the cribs. To be the father they deserve. To show up. Every day. Even when it's hard. My hands shook as I took his. I vow to stop running. To stop believing I have to earn basic kindness. To let myself be seen. I took a breath. To build something real with you. To trust that you mean what you say. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside were 2 simple bands, nothing ostentatious, nothing designed to broadcast wealth or status. Just silver, elegant, real. For when you're ready, he said, slipping one onto his own finger. No pressure. No timeline. Just whenever it feels right. I took the second band. Slid it onto my finger. It fit perfectly. We sealed the bond the way the ritual required. A kiss, gentle and unhurried, that tasted like cherry blossoms and new beginnings. When we pulled apart, Minho made a soft sound in his sleep, and we both turned to look at our sons. Our sons. Not his. Not mine. Ours. They finally have a father who shows up, I said quietly. They always had a parent who showed up. Minjun's arm slid around my waist. Now they just have 2. We stood there as the sun rose, watching the twins sleep in their safe, beautiful nursery, and I understood something fundamental that I'd spent 23 years not knowing. I used to think love meant fighting to be chosen, proving your worth, earning your place, making yourself small enough, quiet enough, useful enough that someone might decide you were worth keeping. Now I know it means choosing someone who won't make you fight at all. Someone who gives you freedom and calls it love. Someone who shows up. Minjun's hand found mine, our matching bands catching the morning light. Ready? He asked. I looked at the twins. At the nursery we'd built together. At the man who'd given me the choice to leave and made me want to stay. Yes, I said. I'm ready. And for the first time in my life, I meant it.